All right. Welcome to the Eternal Way. We've had a lot of discussion about pretty much everything regarding spirituality and the supernatural. I've been doing this for a couple of years. And it was all in attempts, excuse me, it was all in attempts to get to what I am dubbing right now the Eternal Way. Because Christianity, Islam, quantum physics, all these different things are attempts to understand the eternal way. Hi, Mr. Hello, hi, Cartier. How are you doing today, man? I'm doing pretty good. Um, really looking forward to this to this live stream. And by the way, anybody who's here, I'm answering questions on both the black social media and the red social media. I'm using the color terms because the buzzwords. One social media will try to deboost the other one if you say the name. So we're just referring to this one as the black and then this one as the red. Makes sense, right? So all this time we've been discussing Christianity, Christ consciousness, enlightenment, Buddha, bodhisattvas, quantum physics, Brahma, the all, alchemy, hermeticism. I've touched on all of these things over the course of these years and met with a lot of people who got pretty frustrated with me, right? Because I was going into each philosophy and saying, okay, this is right, this is wrong, this we need to get rid of, da 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 da. This is the same as this thing over here. And I think it frustrated a lot of people. And I can understand why. Because when we're born into this very mysterious world, how you doing, Kathy from Mexico City? When we were born into this mysterious world, we didn't have a map, okay? And usually what happens before the institutionalization of philosophy, the institutionalization of ideology, of politics, of economy, before that, human beings figured it out for themselves by using logic, objective reasoning, intuition, the mind, and the heart. And we can see this in indigenous tribes, right? There's tons of indigenous tribes that show us that you don't need some massive infrastructure of ideology in order to go about your day. There is a wisdom. There is an unspoken truth to how one human being interacts with another, and how many human beings interact with each other in a community, in a society, etc. But a small group of very powerful people decided that they were going to make a one way, a new world order, right? This is something that's not just this emergent idea of a new world that we're entering into right now. The idea of a new world order has been being cooked up as early as the 1700s in Europe. This idea that we could create a one way that would span across the globe. The issue is that it had nefarious intentions. The main principles were control. The main principles were destroying the free will through social engineering to create a perfect world. This is what Satan, for all intents and purposes, and we'll dig into that idea, this is what the evil one or the adversary would see as a perfect world. A world where human beings operate the same way the stars and the planets and the heavenly bodies and physics and rocks falling down hills behave, in accordance with these higher laws. Now, they saw themselves as creating these divine laws. But this is a forced way. It's kind of like when you have a free market capitalism or a free market economy, and you have a controlled, a state-run, a state-planned economy. The state-planned economy will collapse because it's trying to force a way upon the natural organic world. This is why we have so many issues with nations and international affairs, because we have a planned international political system instead of an organic one where people get to choose where they want to live. And this will be another thing that if we get ourselves out of this existential crisis, you will see a free market of citizenship where everyone will get to choose where they want to live. And all the nations that weren't good will collapse, will dissolve as a result of no one living there, right? And this is the future of humanity. This is a true global society. So anyways, they've been forcing this way. And they did this through religions, through banking systems, through economies, and through politics. Because these people got so high up that they started to look at all the other people below them as ants or machines to control. But what we need to reconnect with is the eternal way, the way that is always true. This is something we've really struggled with. It's something I've really struggled with on TikTok as well. is that I've been trying to show people that regardless if you believe in Christianity or Islam or Buddhism or quantum physics, or you're an atheist or you're an agnostic, there is one true way. There's this really strange movement in society where you're supposed to speak your truth. This might be one of the most unhealthy and toxic beliefs that we currently have. No individual has their own truth. They have their own opinions, they have their own subjective experience, but truth can only be found in the objective, agreed upon world. It is true I am wearing headphones. It can't be your truth that I'm not, because I'm wearing them. When I say or do something, I know what I'm doing. I know what I'm doing inside of my mind. If someone says their truth is I'm doing something else, that's not truth. That's their opinion, and it's a false opinion. Let's say I give somebody a compliment genuinely because I just want to give them a compliment. I think they're good at something, but that person thinks I'm patronizing them. Well, if they say something, well, it's my truth that you're patronizing me. No. That's just your delusional opinion. That's untrue, right? When we're sitting here and we're looking at, let's say, politics or society, it's a perfect example. When someone does something objectively wrong, or someone does something that's objectively a mistake, and it has real consequences, and someone says, well, it's my truth that this is the right philosophy and this is the way we should go. They do this purposely, by the way. The My Truth movement is not an organic human movement. It's something that was put into our society to divide us further, to disallow us to speak about objective truth, about the real, the reality. Okay, so just remember that. Yeah, let's talk a little bit about relative truth and absolute truth, because it's really going to help us. Thanks, Peter. It's really going to help us to, hey, what's going on, Joe? Exactly. My truth is a diversion and it's a division, right? Just lost it there. So let's talk about relative truth versus objective truth. I'm a moral relativist, and that's quite a triggering buzzword if people don't understand what it means. We all know what morality is. All right, so moral relativism is the idea that morality is a relative thing. But I don't think it's relative like it's relative to the individual. I think morality is relative to the human species. There are 4 major categories of things that human beings do not like. We don't like being lied to, we don't like being cheated, we don't like being stolen from, and we don't like being unalived or any other type of physical or psychological violence. Unless a person is not well, they are mentally ill or severely mentally injured to the point that they take on maladaptive behavior, something like Stockholm syndrome, where people fall in love with their captors. Outside of any delusion or illness of the mind, people don't like those 4 things. So this is our relative morality. Alligators will still try to eat us, or Komodo dragons, right? Those really funny monkeys over in Asia will still steal your stuff. And that's not them breaking their moral code. It's just them being in their nature. And that's why morality is relative. Okay? But it's only relative when we start to see like other species. For instance, if a meteor were to crash into the earth and kill 1 million people, that would be an evil or a great tragedy, but the meteor isn't going to meteor hell. You feel me? All the functions of the universe in general operate on a different thing that's not called morality. Morality is a human construct. But within the human construct, we have these agreed upon rules. And that's why the 10 Commandments are so simple on this. They cover no lying, no stealing, no cheating, no killing. These are the 4 fundamental agreements that human beings need to have with each other. And so when we look through the lens of that is a level of truth. It's not like a divine high truth, but it's a truth that human beings need. It's called justice, right? It's called righteousness. And we need that. And when we don't have that, society falls apart. Nietzsche said, God is dead. And we have so much blood on our hands, not all the water in the oceans and rivers and streams could wash it off. He was saying that principal idea, the conceptualized God, which reminds us to honor those 4 agreements with each other, was killed by scientism. And he was terrified. He wasn't really a theist, but he wasn't celebrating that. He was lamenting, and he predicted the massive destruction and loss of life of the 1900s before it happened, because he knew it was coming. because he knew we lost the foundations. Now, the question becomes, do we bring God back into the fold, or do we find the secular humanist philosophy that we always live by? I don't know the answer to the question, but this idea of a transcendent being or a transcendent state of God or Christ, and that we should live up to that, not only gives us all those principles, but it keeps us humble. It reminds us that we aren't the biggest thing, whether it's the human race or an individual. And so I think that God's a better choice. But we have to have a deeper, better understanding of God. We have to understand God through the eternal way, not some deity named Yahweh or Krishna or any of that. Understanding deeply what God actually means. I'm going to look real quick to see if there's any good questions, and we're going to keep going. Yes. So, hi, Cartier. I'm sorry. Do you have any tips on dealing with chronic pain, back pain, in regards to dealing with morality in the moment and in maintaining calmness when someone is triggering me while dealing with chronic pain? Well, it's interesting because a lot of times chronic back pain is a result of being overstressed in your situation. And so he says, I try to be righteous and think like Christ, but in the moment my subconscious takes over and I lash out at those that push my buttons. It's so hard. So we're dealing with a sort of crisis right now where there's a lot of button pushers. And they're not just human, right? We're dealing with bot button pushers too on the internet. This is a time where everyone is trying to drive you insane. Not everyone, but a large portion of the population is trying to drive you insane, either because they're dealing with dark triad personality disorders, narcissism, histrionic, borderline, et cetera, or you're dealing with the governments who are trying to mess with your head so they can socially engineer you into their system. So first off, you're living in the hardest time to maintain psychological peace, probably in human history, because this internet thing is pervasive. And now they've created billions of bots that are literally designed to be trolls and aggravate you. Because the stress that you give off is energy that give off that I think absorbs into the phone, and later on they will absorb from you in a different means. So it's intentional. The breath. Now, I know as soon as you engage in the breath, and as soon as you engage in Christ consciousness, all of a sudden it's like every aggravating thing comes out of the woodwork. This is the story of Buddha under the Bodhi tree when he meditates toward enlightenment. And right before he breaks through enlightenment, all manner of dark creature and scary things appear before him. Now, this is actually what happens when you meditate toward enlightenment. You will see terrifying beings because they don't want you to get there. It's going to be super hard. And I don't have a perfect answer for you. But what I can say is the breath, and understand that you have to find a way to transcend, always reminding yourself, I will transcend out of these people. Ignore them. What I do when I'm really dealing with a really sick individual is to say, I'll just go on TikTok live right now. I'll let the whole world see the way you're acting. They usually stop immediately. Right? I'll make a video about this. They usually stop immediately. And that's how you'll know that they know what they're doing is wrong. Because if they weren't doing something wrong to you, they'd be like, oh yeah, go ahead and go on live and I'll talk about it there. Right? And or they might be delusional and believe what they're doing. But a lot of times they'll rethink, it's like, oh, if the world saw me doing this, I won't be doing this, right? Especially when you're dealing with a sick individual who's torturing you at home or whatever, family, friends, coworker, whatever. They won't do so much of that stuff in professional situations. They won't do it with their boss. They won't do it if it jeopardizes their money, but they'll do it with you. And that's how you kind of know that they know they're doing something wrong, and they're violent predators in a sense. So you've got to find ways to literally remove these people from your life completely, but also find ways to protect yourself because they don't have many limits. But one limit they do have usually is public embarrassment, right? And so it's tricky because you have to involve people in your personal life. But if you're at that point where they won't leave you alone, you've got to find creative ways to expose them. And also, like I said, remove yourself from the situation. Focusing on the eternal way. Deep breaths in the nose, out the mouth, using your belly, expand your stomach, relax the diaphragm, open your lungs, and you can pull that air in. Let's see if there's any more questions before we keep going with this. Yeah, this will be on YouTube, saved. All right, I'm not seeing too many new questions, so we're going to keep moving with this eternal way. How you doing, Dylan from Colorado? Yeah, hi, Cartier. Continued practice, keeping the back straight, and reminding yourself that you can get better. You can epigenetically layer on your DNA. You are superhuman. You may be struggling and going through this right now. This person hurt their back, broke it 6 years ago, and their posture and their breath work suffers as a result. Remember that you have the ability to heal, right? Make small steps every day. Yeah, keep trying and keep working every day because it will get better. Have the faith the size of a mustard seed, and you can improve through diet, through breath work, through yoga, through stretching. How soon is what coming, Dan's son? You're very welcome, Cartier. So, as I'm waiting for this question to pop in, thank you everyone for being here. It's always lovely to have all of you. We got 100 people here. That's great. So, how does the eternal way, when will the eternal way begin? Let's talk about when would the eternal way will begin. I'm actually working on a few books right now, Peter. It's just things are kind of unstable and difficult at the time, and I'm making a lot of serious transitions in life. But that's the goal, is to be writing these books. How close are we to the change? These are great questions. How close are we to the change? When will the physical changes occur? When will the eternal way begin? The eternal way will begin when humanity finally has its real crisis. One of the issues you're seeing in the world, why so many people are wrapped up in nonsense, whether it's the New Age nonsense, whether it's Christianity, whether it's any institutionalized religion, whether it's an atheistic viewpoint that's nihilistic and destructive. The reason humanity is having such a hard time transitioning into the kingdom of heaven is because people won't let go, because they're terrified. Even back in the day when Christ was preaching the true gospel, and all those people came against him, which ultimately claimed his life, it was because they were scared. They were scared of a loss of power. They were afraid that they would know that the anchors which keep them, the crutches to life that keep them sustained, weren't real. The God and the heaven that's promised to you once you die, if you pay your tithes, this is all a joke. It's all a joke. It's not real. It's fugazi. There's no reason to believe any of that's true. We're still living off the same religions that worship lizard people that ate us. All the Abrahamic religions are based on evil warlords that forced us to worship them, right? All the New Age movements is based on fundamentally true knowledge that has been twisted and corrupted by the CIA and other organizations. There's only one true way. Let's do a little exercise to understand how the eternal way occurs. We're just breathing in our nose, out our mouth. And I want you to imagine that the Tao, the way, is before you, that there's sort of a Holy Spirit messenger, a Gaia, a God on high, that is always sending out information on like a divine radio station. But many times we're blocked because we have literal headphones on, or we have another form of headphones because we're addicted to some chemical, because we haven't been eating right, because we overthink everything. But if we just quieted the mind for a moment, we get tuned into the God radio station, okay? For the consciousness of the earth, the consciousness of the sun, Papa Mama and Papa Pacha. I'm sorry, Pachamama and Pachapapa. The idea of the masculine and feminine force represented in earth and sun, and even higher and lower than that. These masculine principles, the divine mother and father. Imagine that those spirits, those consciousnesses are real. And not only are they real, they're like grander consciousness, okay? What created the eternal way? God itself. Okay, so here's an example. So we're doing this breathing, right? We'll talk about Islam in a minute. That's a good question. And I'm going to drink from my cup in the eternal way. I'm taking a deep breath, and I already realized the way I'm holding it, the cup is putting a lot of pressure on this third finger. So it's not exactly comfortable. So I'm going to change my position. And I'm going to put 3 in there. It doesn't feel quite right. But I'm going to work it until it feels right. And I've got it. That feels really good to me. Okay? So I've got the third one in there, and I've got the pinky tucked under. And now it feels perfect. It feels relaxing to even hold the cup. And I'm going to take a sip. And because I'm breathing and because I'm taking time with that sip, I take in all the flavors of the tea that I'm drinking. And as I'm doing that, I can already feel myself relaxing and less rogue thoughts going through my mind. And I just drank from that cup of tea, and I picked up the cup, something closer to the Tao of my way, the right way. There's a righteous way for everything. Okay, let's think about righteousness real quick. Righteousness, let's say it's the antithesis to sin. It's the opposite of sin. What is sin? Well, in Greek, it's missing the mark. Well, what does that mean? It's a reference to bow and arrow and hitting the target and missing. So what does it mean? When you miss the target with the arrow, you're not going to hell, but you could have done better. You could have executed better. Now take that to all aspects of life. If I go to grab the cup but I'm not thinking correctly and I miss it and I drop it on the floor, that's a sin. Because I missed the mark, because the mark was to pick up the cup and drink a sip and not drop it. That's a sin. What does it say in Hebrew? Because we have to convert the original word from Hebrew into Greek in the Septuagint. Well, in Hebrew, it means to use your energy improperly. Now we get into the ideas of Bruce Lee. Kind of going all over the place, but it all makes sense. So stick with me. When Bruce Lee wrote Jeet Kune Do, he was trying to write the perfect way to martial art. It wasn't a specific practice. It didn't have certain sets and all that. He was trying to figure out what was the Tao of body movement. What was the perfect execution of a punch or a kick, or what was the perfect stance? Yes, being like water, flowing with the true Dharma of reality. And this is the eternal way. So when we talk about sin and we talk about this idea of missing the mark and using your energy improperly, then righteousness must be the opposite of that. Always hitting the mark. Let's just think about thoughts. How many thoughts do you have in your mind that are combative or degrading to yourself, or delusional because you've been told over and over again, right? Trickle down economics work. Christ died for my sins. But you never really ask yourself the question, but does it work? Because I see a world in 2024 after Christ died 2,000 years ago, and people are in a even worse situation than that. If it was such a perfect sacrifice, then why are we dealing with so much issues? Well, because you had to have a second. Well, if it was God coming down as a person, then my assumption is because he's all powerful, he could make it go away immediately. And that's another issue. He died for our sins? No, he didn't, because we all kept on missing the mark. It's a lie. And if we use the eternal way to objectively analyze these things, we can see it as a lie front facing. A lot of people, when I say that Christ didn't die for your sins, that's not true. They'll quote Bible verse, but they won't quote any other book. And then they'll use the Bible as a self-referential tool to continue to back up their own beliefs without objective reasoning. And I'm not just going to pick on Christians, okay? It's everything. It's atheists too. Atheists are fools because atheists believe in the same God as the Christians do. Old Testament version. Okay? They're using the Old Testament argument. Well, it's a narcissistic warlord. Yeah, he was. The Old Testament being that they kept describing, by the way, the Old Testament's a history document. It's not a religious text. They accounted the real history. Those things happen. Regardless of how many scholars and atheists and scientists will tell you, it was a historical account of actual beings, whether they were superterrestrial, interdimensional, or extraterrestrial. These were super powerful beings that lorded over us, forced us. Our word, unaliving, sacrificing. That's what they were dealing with back then. There's a great account on X. His name's Cliff. I can't remember the last name. He talks all about this. It's a worship cult of the Elohim, these higher gods that abused people over and over for hundreds, if not thousands of years. If you read the Old Testament, it's sick. Whoever God is in the Old Testament is a narcissistic lunatic. That's not God. That was an individual pretending to be God, pretending to be a God over people. So when we talk about righteousness, it's the opposite. It's the antithesis to sin. So it means always executing properly. So again, these thoughts, these combative thoughts, these self-degrading thoughts, these delusional ideologies, we can see they're delusional or bad if we take a step, take a breath, and scan what they're doing to us. You ever wake up in the morning and get into an argument in your head between a person that you know? Everyone's done that, right? Argument with your boss, argument with your significant other, right? Why are you doing that? Why are you in a combative space in your own mind? Why are you creating fights in your head? Most of the time it's because they're living in your head rent free, and they are a broken record because of the things they've done to you in the past and all the words you didn't speak that you felt you needed to speak to them. So we create these scenarios of fighting with them. We win the fight in our head to try to make up for all the time that it happened in real life that they did something wrong and we didn't speak out. Right? That's one situation. So if you're combative in your head, well, one, you have to ask yourself, am I the one that's starting the fight? Or if I continually fight in my head about this person, maybe they're not good for me. Maybe most of my interactions with this person are so stressful that it keeps me in a broken feedback loop of chaos and combativeness. The eternal way is peace. The eternal way is harmony. But the eternal way is a science. You see, Buddha created a science of the mind. We put all these things just in this realm of spirituality. Just like Islam and Buddhism and Christianity, what it's supposed to be. These are ways of being which create harmony within and harmony without. The kingdom of heaven is before you, Christ said. He didn't say the kingdom of heaven is when after you die, if you've been a good little boy or girl. He said the kingdom of heaven is before you. It's right in front of you. We build the kingdom of heaven, or we build the kingdom of hell based on our actions and thoughts. So the eternal way is first a slowing down. Thank you all for the compliments. It's very kind of you. You're very welcome. I'm grateful for you being here, Guardian of Divine Souls. You guys are all of you guys are wonderful. Thanks for being here. So let's talk more about the eternal way. So this is how we discover it. When does it get here? When humanity has its existential crisis. You know, everyone has a relative that doesn't take care of themselves, eats the wrong food, doesn't exercise enough, but won't listen to advice. But then they have that health crisis, and what do they do most of the time? What do they do most of the time? How you doing, FS Countess? Glad you're here. Then they start to get their act together after they have the diabetes diagnosis, or they get the heart attack. You know what I mean? Or they break a leg because they're overweight and they tried sports. That's what needs to happen for humanity. Humanity has to have its life-altering health crisis. And although it looks like we're in that crisis now, and we are, it's still not enough. The pain threshold of existence must overcome the pain threshold they have for their own ego. And there's a lot of misconceptions about ego. An ego isn't saying I am great. If you're great at something, you're great at something. Right? Christian Bale gets to say, I'm one of the greatest actors that ever lived. It's not ego. It's the truth. Cicero is a perfect example of this. Cicero, in a lot of his talks, would speak very highly of himself, but he'd also speak highly of all of his colleagues, right? And would say when his colleagues were better than him at something. But he also gave himself credit. This isn't ego. The ego is a fearful thing. The ego is something that needs people to think they're great. The ego is something that needs a cushy little pillow to protect them from the mysteries of reality, the abyss that lies just underneath your false beliefs. But a lot of people are still living in those beliefs, and they do it in a bunch of different ways. Whether they're addicted to an ideology that's untrue, or they're addicted to making money because they know that the more money they have, the stronger they are. They can build their bunkers, they can fill their fridges with food, They can hire a personal military, you know what I mean? These types of things. Because everyone's, at the end of the day, we're afraid of death. We're afraid of the mystery of existence, how this happened. We're afraid of why it's happening. Is it a matrix trap? Is it a heaven? Is it a dream? When it ends, where does it all go? What was nothing before something? Who came before God? These are the things that really screw with us. And as a result, we've taken on all of these unhealthy behaviors to protect us from having to think about those things. But it's not scary. It's just become scary because we've become so unfamiliar with the mystery. What's the mystery? Well, it's the thing that'll keep you up at night. How are we here? I want everyone to think about that. Grevno, thank you for being here. Glad you're here. Thank you so much. Let's do a little thought experiment here. Everyone ask themselves this question. How are we here? How is this happening? Not just human beings, existence itself. Right back at you, Leonel. Yeah, but what is God? How did God get here? Yeah, how did God get here? How did God get here? Can't compute. It's the divine paradox. There's no answer. And most people faced with that eternal paradox will make up a story. You all know it. Everyone makes up a story. Scientists call it the Big Bang, primordial atom. Religion says God spoke the word and the word became flesh. God was always there. But that's just them making stuff up because no one was there. It's the eternal paradox, and it's terrifying. When you really think about it, it'll scare the shit out of you, and you won't be able to sleep. So we stop thinking about it, or we medicate, or we make up a story. No, we can't know. We can't know. And that's why when quantum physicists look at subatomic particles and try to see what they're going to do next, the subatomic particles purposely misbehave. Because that's at the bottom of the paradox of reality that we're allowed to see. And so it plays games with us. And that's why everything gets all fuzzy and weird. The more you look down at particles and subatomic behaviors, it doesn't make any sense anymore because it has to. We can't see past that right now. We're four-dimensional beings. It's impossible. But we must embrace that terror. We must embrace that terror together. Right now, we're separated by it. We all fight with each other because we're trying to distract ourselves from those things. But once we accept it, yes, we find peace. Yes, exactly, the Ascension Project. That's the goal, is to become at peace with it. You ever get really close to someone, probably a significant other, and you fall deeply in love with them, and all of a sudden that fear of when you're going to lose them pops up. And it kind of derails you, right? Maybe you get some space from them. Maybe you start fights in the relationship. It terrifies you. Because the deeper you love a person, the more it'll hurt when they're gone. And nothing lasts forever, and life is fleeting. And so this can destroy relationships, right? Because you just can't deal with the pain of the loss until you accept it and you come at peace with it. What we all need is a great grieving for the mystery of existence. Everyone will tell you that God gave us a book. No one gave us a book. There's no book. There was no written way for us. We emerged into this. We are an emerging phenomenon of reality, of organized matter. That doesn't take away from the divinity or supernatural or magical aspect of reality. But we have to come to terms with the fact that if we look at our hands, these are monkey hands. Dogs sneeze, and so do we. These are these karmic momentums that have been here since the beginning, and we are a part of that dance. And this wasn't something interjected to just make us. We are a part of a beautiful process that's extremely mysterious. And we've tried to tell ourselves that we know what's going on and we have it all figured out, and we don't. We don't have anything figured out, But there's beauty in that too. Why is intellect? It's really time that people start most people get it. That it's important to hear out what I'm saying. But some people come here and all they want to do is argue and say that they know the way. I know I am wise because I know nothing. What I just said is we don't know. And you're disagreeing with me, even though it's impossible to you to prove how we're here, why we're here. No one knows. No one knows. No one knows, and no one will probably ever know inside a fourth dimensional reality. Because we live in a causal universe, cause and effect. Okay? Therefore, this is something about cause and effect that people don't talk about a lot. Every cause is also an effect. You understand? There is no first cause because we live in a causal reality. We have to think in terms of one thing leads to another, but that first one thing also needs something before it. We can't wrap our heads around anything besides that. And in order for this reality to exist, we need something outside of cause and effect. It's impossible for us to contemplate how it happened. It's impossible. It's the divine paradox, as Zen Buddhism speaks of. It's a paradox that cannot be reconciled. How is something eternally? There's no way to know. How can something always have been here? What? How? From where? From what? We can't contemplate it. We have to embrace that. We have to embrace the fact that we live and then we die. We have to embrace the fact that when we're born, we don't have a personality. Therefore, we don't have an ego. Exactly. Who made the creator? We can't know. It's impossible to know these things. But this is part of the eternal way. We first must embrace what's called the great terrors. This is what's tearing us apart. You've heard of the cycle of empires? Empires rising and falling, and they have 7 stages. Do you know why the empires rise and fall? Not because it's a cycle organically. It's because once they get to I think it's the 5th or 6th stage, they regress into hedonism because they touch upon the divine truths. Because every empire has a height of scientific and philosophical understanding, but then they push on the edges of reality. It freaks them out, and they start to become hedonistic and focus on bread and circus and entertainment because they push up against the fabric of reality, and they're like, oh shit, this is some sort of dream or something. And there's something beyond this that I can't understand. And I'm not me. This isn't real. I've been playing a character. The whole civilization does that. And that's how we have falls of empire. That's why empires fall. Because it's too much for us, because we haven't been able to take that step. That's a big part of this. So empires don't have to fall. They have to innovate. But in order to innovate past that high stage, they have to be able to embrace the great terrors. So people ask, this idea of getting rid of religions or religions dissolving. And let's talk a little about Islam, because I know I give Christianity a hard time quite a bit. The thing about Islam, and the reason I defend Islam so much, is because they get so much of it right all the time. Like when they talk about God, they talk about most merciful, most compassionate, most loving. There's the 99 names of God. And what does it do? It lists all the righteous actions so you don't miss the mark. And then you put that above yourself and you aspire to be more like it. It's a beautiful principle. It's the same, though, as like the 2 commandments in Namaste, right? And this idea of your higher self. And you see, the thing people don't understand about Islam is it's not a religion the way Christianity has become a religion in modern times. It's a way in which you should carry out your life. This idea of no usury, no charging interest on loans, don't eat pork. Pork's terrible for you. It's full of parasites. It's extremely bad for you. It's good advice. Interest on loans creates a debt that you cannot ever pay back truly, because you're always going to have to borrow or make more than exists. You have to pull money from nothing. Eventually, it destroys nations. It always does. It always destroys nations. It always destroys people's lives. You should be able, if someone's in need and they ask for money, they ask for help, you should be able to help them without having to make money off it. That's different than a business. A business says, I want to borrow $1 million from you, and then they make $3 million. Of course, they should pay it forward to you. That's not the same as charging interest on a loan because someone needs it to pay a bill. And so, like, as far as, so yeah, but we have to be specific about what the dark side is. People talk a lot about, Muhammad ruling with the sword. Well, so did Christianity with the Crusades. Well, that's in the past. Do you see a bunch of people ruling by the sword with Islam? No. Don't tell me ISIS. ISIS is CIA. Don't tell me 9/11, because we all know who did that. It wasn't Islamic radical. Don't tell me terrorists in Afghanistan. Those are freedom fighters fighting for their own country. When Al-Qaeda took over initially, they destroyed all the opium fields. A year later, U.S. moved in, and the opium production was at its highest, and then heroin epidemic happened across the Western world. So all those things have nothing to do with it. You feel what I'm saying? Now, Wahhabism, there's a lot of things to be critical there. The Sunnis and the Shiites fighting with each other over their particular, of course, that's ridiculous. But so is it with the Muslims and the Buddhists in Pakistan and India, unaliving each other with machetes. Anytime we see the violence in these religions, we should be criticizing that specifically. But we have to be very critical and line by line say, does this work? Does this not work? Is this just a radical offshoot? Or is it a structural problem deep within the fundamental foundations of the philosophy? What foundational beliefs? And Edgar Allan Poe married his 15-year-old niece or something. It's like, okay, we wouldn't do that today. But they would also see a bunch of things we do as barbaric. So we can't judge it by the actions of the individuals that lived 1,000 years ago. We could do that all day. But that would be silly because the ancients would look at us and think we're barbaric for many of the things that we do. Right? We are run by leaders who are committing pedophilia on a daily basis behind the scenes, and we allow them to remain in power even though we know they did it. That's barbaric for us not to stand up against tyranny of that order. Sweatshops in China, children mining cobalt in dangerous mines in Congo, the occupation of watermelon, all those terrible things. That's what we need to focus on. Look at what the actual foundations of the philosophy does. Now, do we need an Islam or a Christianity or a Buddhism? No, we need to just know the righteous way because it's self-evident. It is self-evident. We use these things as tools because it's hard to remember everything. But all these things are based, they're just like little bumpers to keep us on the straight and narrow path. We all have the straight and narrow path within us because we're all human. So we all know the human way. We just need to quiet. Yeah, and Taoism, Taoism, Zen Buddhism. I mean, the alchemy, Hermeticism. I mean, these are the closest things to truth. If you want to talk legitimate religions or spiritual systems, Taoism, whichever way you want to pronounce it, alchemy, Hermeticism, Zen Buddhism. I mean, these are the closest things to truth. What matriculates out of that? Oh, I'm on the Red social media too. So I'm doing the video there, but I'm also hosting the live on the TT. So we don't need a name. We don't need a system that's called a certain thing. We definitely don't need more than one. The way is eternal. The way is true. Simple rules to start with. Don't steal. Don't lie. Don't cheat. Don't kill with murder in your heart. So let's talk about how we extrapolate out these things. Because the 10 Commandments, for instance, it doesn't say thou shalt not kill. It says thou shalt not murder. It's a big difference. If a thief breaks into your house and is planning on unaliving you and your family and taking all your stuff, because they just don't want to deal with tying you up and all this other nonsense, they're just going to unalive you and take all your stuff. If you unalive that person, it's righteous. Everyone here watching this can tell me exactly why that's righteous. There'll be a couple morons that'll say, well, I'd rather just give my life so I don't do the bet. No. Right? They're either cowards or they're just trying to prove their ideology correctly. No, you're absolutely in your grounds to unalive a person who's trying to unalive you. Right? If you've done nothing wrong and they're coming at you because they want to take your stuff or they want to silence you for telling the truth, you have every right to defend yourself. That's the difference between murder in your heart and killing, right? If you steal something that was originally stolen from you and you steal it back, that's not stealing. That's getting back what's yours. But these are very obvious and logical things. The problem is one, we've handed over the decision power for that to these small groups of people with lots of power, or we're too much in our emotions and our ego and our ideologies. Right? How many Christians will say Islam is bad, but then they give you these ridiculous things that, like, this prophet 1,000 years ago had an underage wife. So go, wait a second. What's happening now with Islam that's bad? Well, 9/11. So clearly that was Saudi Arabia and American government looking the other way. Yeah, there's going to be so much context on this video on YouTube. Wikipedia context at the bottom of this, but it's true. We know, we absolutely know that was intentional. If you look at the money, you look at the way things were traded, you look at the insurance that were taken out, they knew that was going to happen. And so, like, we have to say, if you have to be critical of the actual religion. Same thing with ISIS. You understand there was a 20-year psyop that was run, an anti-Muslim psyop that was meant to make the Western world have Islamophobia so that they could justify the destruction of the Middle East, which is happening right now. Syria, Libya, Palestine, Iran, Iraq. There was a list of 7 countries that were going to be destroyed for their resources by the Western world, and they succeeded. And the first thing they had to do is get the public to dehumanize Middle Eastern people and Islam. You had to destroy people's perception of their identity, and that's what they did, and that's why they did it. And then they destroyed all those countries. This was a political move. Right? Yeah. So if this is true, this idea of mutilation, this genital mutilation, is that in Islam, or is that just one particular group in that country in Africa that does it? That is definitely reading the text wrong. See, I don't know everything about Islam, but I don't have to. All we have to do is take each case by itself. That would be under, like, physical violence against somebody's will. If you're circumcised, if you do circumcision on a boy, it's obviously bad here too. You should be able to let the boy choose, right? We do it over here. We circumcise little boys all the time. It happens here. That's genital mutilation, right? And that's a Jewish thing, right? Which is carried into the Christian world and all that. So yeah, we can ask those questions. We can ask all those questions, right? But at the end of the day, it's got to be case to case. And then we work out, okay, what works and what doesn't, okay? But ultimately, yeah, we just have to dispose of all these things because there's only one true way. Peace and freedom are definitely not not the same. But that's the thing is, all human beings deserve freedom because we're born free. We should be free to do everything we can unless it violates other people's freedoms. Hey, what's happening, Tyrone? Good to see you, man. So yeah, the eternal way is what we must tap into. It's the one with no name. And now I'm starting to get it. It's a reminder of the final part of this discussion that needs to be talked about. This is a dream reality. And we can dream up anything we want it to be. Right now, we have a very small group of people that are dreaming it for us. And they're dreaming it in a way that's only good for them and not for us. this world feels like a matrix and a prison and a nightmare because some people have made it into that. But this place is a sandbox. We can make anything we want here. And if you start meditating and if you start thinking about the weird supernatural, doesn't the supernatural start happening all around you? Yeah, I just got my live access removed on TikTok. Of course, for hateful speech. I just want YouTube, just so YouTube knows, and later on when people watch this and they know that I just got my live access removed from TikTok, y'all know I wasn't doing any hate speech. There was nothing about what I just said that was hate speech. I was being honest and I was talking about what's actually happening. Like, I didn't say anything that was not true objectively. But that's another issue, right? This is what we're dealing with all the time. It was probably somebody in the comments that reported me in some silly thing. What are you going to do? TikTok's become trash, obviously. We're going to keep going until YouTube decides to be idiots too. Yeah, but I'm real sick of having to hold my tongue on things that are just true. And so I'm not going to do it anymore. And if the internet won't allow me to be on it anymore, if people will continue to report me, then whatever, right? But we have to be able to stand up for what's right, regardless of the punishment. Hey, Lionel, thanks for being here. Yeah, they just removed my live access. God knows why. I don't know what they said hate speech. I can't think of what I possibly said that was hateful to any group. But they'll do whatever they can to keep you quiet. I told the truth. Yeah, so let's discuss this last thing, which is interesting that they cut this off right when we were going to talk about this. Yeah, but it's like we were just discussing the idea of it. It wasn't hateful speech. I was like, oh yeah, there is that genital mutilation thing that happened in that one country in Africa. That's just true. But I was also saying, was it just a radical group? We shouldn't try to. It's just one radical sect of people that are doing that. It was just a question. But I was also not saying that they're terrible people, right? And then I said, male circumcision is genital mutilation, which is objectively true. And that is a Jewish tradition. So it's so strange. I didn't say anything hateful. I just literally said what was true. But it doesn't matter. I don't care anymore. I don't care that these lunatics, whether it was an individual person that reported my live or it's TikTok pulling me down, screw them. Screw them. Yeah, so anyways, let's discuss this last really important thing. There's something very strange and powerful and majestic about reality that we've lost because our minds are being completely screwed with all the time. People used to have relationships with fairies. I'm not making this up. Purple drank, disconnect completely, and breathe and put that protection around you because it will go away. It wears off. It's not tearing your soul apart, but don't speak like that either because you're giving power to that idea. Empower yourself. Yep. Harvey Hayes, I think that might have been actually the reason that they cut off the live is because I started talking about dreaming the world into what we want it to be and that a certain group. And I didn't mean when I mean a group, I mean a group of powerful people. The people it's not any particular group. It's what's his face, the governor of California. It's Klaus Schwab at WEF. It's what I mean. I wasn't alluding to the big thing that everyone's talking about on the internet right now. They're gonna put their own nail in their own coffin, as you can see, the last couple of days. So I don't have to say anything about that. We could all see objectively what's happening there. And thankfully, there's a couple of brave people and nations that are willing to say it all for us, so we don't have to anymore. Yeah, they'll bury themselves. And it's, again, it's still not a group of people. It's just a particular people in power, right? It's Mr. N. It's BB. BB's at fault. It's not all the people that live in that nation. I'm sure not. I talked to people from that nation, wonderful people, kind people. It's not everyone, right? So, yeah, purple drank. Remind yourself of that. So let's just discuss for just a few minutes, and we'll get off here. Really grateful of everyone that came here and to the TikTok stream. Oh God, TikTok's so terrible. They're god awful for censorship right now. Yeah, when I do the stuff, I'll be doing more on YouTube because TikTok just keeps showing me over and over again how insane they are. People used to communicate with supernatural beings. There are massive amounts of accounts, credible accounts by credible people in towns who would have relationships with fairies, And these stories almost perfectly mimic our alien connection we have now. There is something very strange happening. And many of these beings are manifested out of our consciousness. And the reason we're seeing so much of this demonic and weird, scary aliens is because the world has become so dark because we're dealing with a lot of compounded trauma that we need to relieve humanity of. And those connections, those experiences we have with UFOs and these beings will become more and more positive because we build a lot of these things. They're called tulpas or egregores. Um, so let this be your mind state that the world is a dream, quite literally. And just like in your dream, you can break the laws of physics, you can do that here too. This is the beginning of the way to get in touch with the magical nature of reality. They've wanted you to feel disconnected, like this is only material, that there isn't something special happening here, but there is an invisible world of creation that you have access to as a conscious being, conscious of itself. Don't ever forget that. This is what we're fighting for, to dream a new world. Yes, the deep breathing, and I want you to remind yourself that nothing bad has happened to you yet. So when you experience these spiritual, supernatural events, remember that they were always there, you just couldn't see them. And they didn't hurt you before, and they won't hurt you now. The only thing the negative ones can do is get into your head, make you feel fear. So fear itself. The only thing to fear is fear itself. There's nothing to be afraid of because it hasn't hurt you yet. There's something bigger happening here. And we have to go into the mystery courageous. Courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is facing something even though you're fearful. Meditate on that, right? Do little things, exposure therapy. Sometimes I would just I'd be out camping and I'd take a walk a little bit out to the forest with my flashlight by myself. I'd do it in safe places where there's no bears and actual dangerous things, but put yourself in unfamiliar places. That's a good way to face the abyss when it comes hitting you when you attain Christ consciousness. Is give yourself little ways to be a little braver, little baby steps. It's called exposure therapy in psychology. Do it with the idea of the abyss. It'll be helpful. The goal here is to dream a new world and to be always in the state of working toward it and finding more and more ways to just protect yourself from the stress, right? That's the idea. Yeah, and also surrender and accept all the terrifying things in reality. This is how you find that invincibility. Yes, dream the new world, sing the new song. In every thought, in every action, in every word, what would Christ do? What would Buddha do? What would God want you to do? Try to maintain that state as often as possible. This is how we build the new world. Guys, it's been wonderful. I got to get a few more things done tonight, but I really appreciate you all being here. Love you guys. Thank you so much. God bless, peace, and respect, and I will see you soon.